Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do the Meet the Booktuber tag, and I saw Miriam Elizabeth Reed's doing this, and I've seen a couple of other ones, but she said, if you haven't done it before, consider yourself tagged and go do it. So I thought this would be fun, and like she said, I did not do any kind of tag like when I first started my channel, so this is going to be like a fun one. I think you're supposed to do this like after you've had your channel for a while, but you've already done the newbie book tag, which I never did that one. But I really like the questions in here, and it gets me to talk about a lot of different books, so I'm excited to get into this one. And you may be thinking,
wow, Haley, your video last week was such good quality. Why are you inside this week?
Well, it is actually pouring down rain. Well, it was this morning, so it's really wet outside, and it's nice and cool out there, so I'd love to be out there, but it's a little bit wet for doing a video. But I have some nice, cozy clothes on, which definitely makes me feel like Celestia, because I feel like she wears a sweatshirt in like every one of her videos, so that's what I feel like when I'm looking in the camera. And I've got some coffee, and we're gonna jump into the questions in this tag. So the first question is, how did you decide what genre of books you wanted to read? If you've seen my video, I think it's called like Library Tour, I'll link it, but I went through our whole house and talked about how I started to love reading and how my parents helped me with that. And so I think a lot of what genres I chose to read are ones that I grew up reading a lot, so I was really familiar with them. Historical fiction, I always loved reading those because we did a lot of history, and then the fiction was the way that I would really dig deep into that time period and see what was going on. So I've always really liked historical fiction. And then classics, my dad always loved classics and always pushed us to read those, and we have lots of them everywhere, so I enjoy that. And then I think in general though, like the decision that makes me want to read a certain book, there are genres that I like better than others. I will read some from all different kinds of genres, but the main determining factor is it clean, and does it have good morals, and is it going to be, you know, whatever is pure, excellent, true, all those things. That's pretty much what determines what I'm going to read, because it doesn't matter what genre it is. If it has something that is sinful in it or glorifies that sin, then I'm probably not going to read it or finish it if I find out after I've begun. Question number 2. What author is most like me? I don't really know, because I don't really know that many authors, and the ones that I do like follow on Instagram, I don't necessarily like them that much and feel like I would relate to them that much, so I'm not really sure. Obviously I like Elizabeth Musser, and she's a Christian and a missionary's wife, so I can kind of relate to her. A lot of like the female authors from like classics and stuff that I like, I know that their theology isn't great and the way that they live their life isn't great, so I'm not sure, because I don't really know that much about authors. Question number 3. If you were stranded on an island, what book would you take? Okay, so this is kind of 3 books, kind of 6 books, but if I could take just one, like a whole book version of all of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, like it was all in one book, and I could take that on a desert island, that would be amazing, because I'm almost done with Return of the King right now. But if you had the time to just take like all 3 books, and you had the appendices too, and you could just write out like every little thing that you see in there, and like connect all the dots and write out that history for yourself, I think that would be so cool. So that would definitely be one that I would take with me, because you could spend hours and hours just studying it and learning all these different things, and I think that would be really fun. Question number 4. Do you like buying books to read them, or because they look pretty? Yes. So I like listening to a lot of books, and if it's a book I don't really know much about, I will listen to it first and then decide if I want to buy it to read it later on. So I've done that with a couple of books, like Fountains of Silence I listened to, and a couple of other books I'll buy after I really enjoy listening to them. But I wouldn't necessarily just go to the bookstore and say, hey, this book is pretty, I'm going to buy it to put on my shelf. But books that I really like Jane Eyre, I have 3 copies of Jane Eyre. My mom actually buys me all those because she thinks they're so pretty. But I do like finding a pretty copy, like the Blue Castle. I'm looking for like the best copy of that. But I guess I would only buy them if I was going to read them. Question number 5. What book could you have read 10 years ago that would have changed your life? Okay, I have 2, and they're both nonfiction books. The first one, which I think I will mention a couple more times in this video, is Gentle and Lowly. You've probably heard me talk about this a lot, but it just explains who Christ is, and it really gives you motivation for, I feel like, living your Christian life. And just having that solid foundation of who Christ is and how we relate to him and how he loves us is so important. And I think the earlier anyone can read this, the better, because it will really just help with your Christian life and help you to grow to love him more and understand your relationship with him more. So this would definitely be one. But then the other one, so 10 years ago, I would have been 10 years old, and I definitely wish that I would have read this one or something similar to it, but I think this one's a great one even for younger girls to read. It's not that complicated, how to relate to guys in a healthy, sane, and biblical way. And I definitely went through that teenage phase of boy crazy, and I didn't read this until I was maybe 17 or 18. But I think if I would have read this earlier, it would have been really helpful to me, just because it explains that, hey, you can be friends with guys and not always be trying to, like, flirt with them, or, I don't know, you can just be close to them in a good biblical way. And I didn't really understand, like, the dangers of that and what you should and shouldn't do. So I think this book would have been really helpful to me. So if you are a younger girl and you haven't read this book and you find yourself struggling with those things, I would highly recommend to read this sooner rather than later. Question number 6. If there were only 3 books in the world, what would they be? So the first one would definitely be Gentle and Lowly, because it's biblical. People need to read it to know who Jesus is. Oh, and obviously the Bible, but I'm not going to count the Bible in a lot of these answers. So Gentle and Lowly. I'm gonna spill my coffee. The next one I would say is Little Women, just because of the way that it portrays family and what the love of a family is. I know that the author wasn't all that great, but every time I read this story or watch the movie, I am just overwhelmed by how amazing the story is and how you see all the different personalities and how they all love one another. And even all my brothers watched the movie and really enjoyed it. So I think that is definitely a book that is worth being one of the 3. And then the third one I would choose would be Jane Eyre. It's always been my favorite book since I read it, and I have 3 copies of it, so I feel like it deserves this spot. But it's so good. It's fiction, it's fun to read. It covers so many different topics, and I feel like styles in it, and I think there's a lot to be learned, whether it's learning negatively from, like, her mistakes or learning the positive lessons that it presents in the book. I think this book is just so good for everyone to read. So those would be my 3 books. If you could write a book about anything, what would it be? I don't think I would ever write anything fiction, just because I don't have a creative mind like that. And I don't necessarily like writing. But if I was going to write a book, I would probably do something on relationships. I feel like I've read a lot of the books. A lot of these books over here are like my relationship books, and it's not that complicated. Although, so maybe writing something about that, or writing a book about books, like about all the books that I've read and how they've impacted me, something along those lines. Question number 8. What character do you feel is most like you? This is hard for me to really appreciate a character that much and, like, see myself in there. I mean, in Middlemarch, I saw some of myself in, like, Dorothy, but I don't pay attention to characters that much. But one that I've always really just thought of myself as is definitely Anne from Anne of Green Gables, and I have a friend who I feel like is a lot like Diana, so we joke about that a lot. Not in, like, the creative way am I like Anne, but more of just the crazy, romantic, very strong personality. Lots of, I guess, like, her virtues and her faults are on her sleeve, so I kind of feel like that I relate to that. And yeah, I really like Anne, and I like her story. So probably that's what I would say. Question number 9. How do you plan out your booktube content? Do people plan their booktube content? Oh. Yeah, so I don't plan at all. For this, it's Friday morning right now, and you will probably see this video in like 6 hours. I don't really plan it because I don't have time to sit down and plan it. I kind of just do it whenever I do have time. And there's some videos, like my monthly recap, that I make sure and do every month. But other than that, it's really just whatever I see other people doing that I think is really cool, or books that I really want to talk about, and I'll make a video about it. So it's kind of just spontaneous. And then question number 10. If you were dying, what book would you read to the world? Bet you already know what the answer is going to be. Gentle and lowly, because Christians need to know this. I think even unbelievers who just see God as this wrathful God, which is right, but I think they would benefit from reading this and just knowing that he does want them to come and to change and to repent of their sins and to know him. So I would definitely just love reading this. And I feel like even if you only read the first chapter, the first page, there's such good, beautiful stuff in this book. So I hope you enjoyed this tag. It was fun for me to do. I love when people come up with these different creative questions for you to get to know me, for me to talk about some of my favorite books. So if you really enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you back here next week. Bye!